Aisha stood outside the military training camp, holding her admission file tightly in her hands. She had dreamed about this moment for years. While other girls her age talked about fashion, college, and marriage, Aisha spent her time learning survival skills, studying rescue operations, and training her body to be strong. She didn't want an easy life. She wanted a meaningful one, a life where she could save others. When she walked through the gate, the other trainees stared. Some were surprised, some were amused, and some whispered to each other. It wasn't normal to see a woman joining a high-risk rescue unit. This team was known for dangerous missions, collapsed buildings, disaster zones, war areas, places where only the strongest survived. Aisha knew this, but she wasn't afraid. The leader of the unit, Sergeant Davis, watched her as she walked in. He was a tough, serious man with years of experience. He had seen soldiers break down, cry, and quit. He didn't believe in kindness. He believed in strength. And when his eyes fell on Aisha, he instantly judged her. In his mind, she didn't belong here. During the first roll call, Davis looked at her file and then at her. "So, you're the new recruit?" he asked, his voice sharp. "Yes, sir," Aisha answered, standing straight. He didn't reply. He just stared at her, shaking his head like he already knew she would fail. Training started the same day. The first task was simple, running with heavy weights. The male trainees were strong, fast, and confident. They had muscles built over years of sports and gym workouts. Aisha was not as fast as them, but she didn't stop. Even when her legs burned and her lungs felt like fire, she kept going. Some boys laughed behind her back. "Look at her," one of them joked. "She's going to faint." But she didn't faint. She finished last, but she finished. Later, they had to climb a high wall using only a rope. Aisha tried again and again, her hands shaking, her arms hurting, but she didn't give up. Every time she fell, she stood again, breathing deep and pulling herself up. Some trainees were impressed, but Davis was not. He watched her struggles and said loudly, "This is not a place for weak people. If you can't keep up, go home." Aisha said nothing. She just wiped her hands, grabbed the rope again, and tried harder. Day after day, the training became tougher. Carrying injured dummies on shoulders, crawling under barbed wire, running through mud, jumping across burning pits. Everything felt impossible. But Aisha kept pushing. When others fell asleep in their bunks, she stayed awake, stretching her sore muscles, practicing breathing, strengthening her grip, telling herself, "One more day, just one more day." Some of the trainees slowly started to respect her. They saw her waking up earlier than everyone, running longer, practicing silently, never complaining. But Davis still looked at her with the same cold eyes. He didn't see her hard work. All he saw was someone he believed would slow the team down. One evening, after a long day of training, the squad was dismissed. Everyone walked away, tired and sweaty. But Davis called out, "Everyone except Aisha, stay." The other trainees turned, curious. Aisha stood still, heart pounding. Davis walked closer and stared at her like she was a problem that needed to be removed. "You think this is bravery?" he said. "This is foolishness. You don't belong here. You're slowing my team. You're dead weight." The words cut deep. They weren't just harsh. They were meant to break her spirit. But Aisha didn't lower her head. She didn't cry. She just stood there silently, letting his anger burn out. After he left, she finally exhaled. She felt the pain of his words, but she also felt something stronger, a fire inside. She didn't come here to be liked. She came here to prove that strength was not about gender or appearance. It was about heart. She walked back to her room quietly. She knew the road ahead would be harder. She knew Sergeant Davis would not make it easy for her. But she also knew something else: she was not leaving. Not now. Not ever. Because one day, the same people who doubted her would see why she was here. One day, even the man who called her dead weight would realize how wrong he was. And that day would change everything. The next few weeks were even harder for Aisha, not because of the training, but because of the way people treated her. Every morning, she woke up before the sun, tied her hair, and prepared herself not just for physical challenges, but for the humiliation she knew was waiting for her. Sergeant Davis made sure everyone saw her as a burden. Whenever she tried her best, he pointed out her smallest mistakes. If she ran slower than others, he shouted, "See? This is why women don't belong here." If she lifted something with effort, he said loudly, "Dead weight. Completely useless." The worst part was not his shouting. It was the silence of others. The trainees who once looked at her with curiosity now looked at her like she was the reason they were held back. They didn't talk to her, didn't sit with her, didn't train with her. It was like she didn't exist. But Aisha still didn't break. During lunch breaks, others laughed, joked, and relaxed. Aisha sat alone in a quiet corner, eating slowly, thinking about her mother's words. "If life tries to push you down, stand up even stronger." She repeated those words like a prayer. One day during obstacle training, the squad had to carry a heavy injured dummy through mud and thick grass. It was a task to teach teamwork. Everyone worked in pairs. But no one wanted to pair with Aisha. When Davis saw her standing alone, he didn't assign her a partner. He smirked and said in front of all, "Maybe the dummy should carry her instead." The whole squad laughed. Aisha's face burned with embarrassment, but she didn't say anything. She lifted the dummy alone, even though it was supposed to be a two-person job. Her shoulders shook, her back hurt, but she kept walking, step by slow step, while people stared. One trainee, Mark, muttered to his friend, "Why doesn't she just quit? She's making a joke of herself." Aisha heard it, but she didn't react. She just walked, even when her knees felt like they would break. At night, she cried silently in her bed. Not because she was weak, but because she had no one to talk to. No friend to say, "You're doing great." No one to tell her, "Keep going." She wiped her tears and reminded herself, "I am not here for them. I am here for the mission." A few days later, the squad had a rope bridge drill, one of the hardest tasks. The bridge was shaky, high, and dangerous. One wrong step could cause serious injury. When Aisha reached the middle, the rope shifted, and she slipped a little. She didn't fall, but she lost balance for a second. That was all Davis needed. He shouted, "Look at that! If this was a real mission, the whole team would die because of her." His voice echoed through the field. Aisha steadied herself, finished the crossing, and came down. But inside, she felt a storm. No matter how hard she tried, it was never enough for him. Later that evening, Davis called the squad again. "You all need to understand something," he said loudly. "In rescue missions, there is no room for weakness. If even one person slows the team down, people die. And he pointed at Aisha, "is a danger to all of you." Nobody defended her. Not a single person. But something strange began happening inside some of them. A few trainees like Mark muted their laughs. They had seen her efforts. They had seen her stay late, train alone, run extra rounds, lift extra weights. Even if they didn't say it, they knew she was trying harder than anyone else. But fear is powerful. Nobody wanted to go against the sergeant. One night, while Aisha was practicing climbing again after everyone left, one of the trainees quietly approached her. His name was Ryan. "You don't have to push so hard," he said softly. Aisha looked at him, confused. "If I don't push, I'll fall behind. If I fall behind, they'll throw me out." Ryan hesitated, then said, "They already decided you're not good enough. But I've been watching. You work harder than all of us." That single sentence meant more to her than 1,000 speeches. For the first time, someone noticed. She gave a small smile and said, "I'm not here to be better than others. I'm here to be better than who I was yesterday." Ryan nodded. "Keep going. One day they'll see." But even with those words, the next day brought more insults, more eye rolls, more whispers behind her back. Still, Aisha didn't break. Her hands were full of rope burns, her knees were scratched, her muscles were always sore, but her will stayed strong. She knew one thing: the people who laugh now will not laugh forever. And the man who keeps calling her dead weight will one day understand. She was never the weak one. He just never saw her strength. Yet, the days passed, and the pressure on Aisha kept growing. She was already fighting her own tired body every day. But now she was also fighting the judgment of everyone around her. Still, she kept going, because quitting was not something she ever allowed herself to even think about. Then came the day that changed everything. It was supposed to be a normal training drill, something the team had done many times. They were practicing emergency evacuation under time pressure. The goal was simple. Rescue a dummy victim, carry it across a field, and load it into a rescue vehicle within a strict time limit. Everyone was focused, running in pairs, shouting instructions, moving fast. Aisha was doing her part, carrying medical supplies and watching the clock. She wasn't the fastest, but she was doing her job correctly. Until it happened. One of the bags Aisha was carrying slipped from her hand and fell to the ground. It was just a small mistake, but the timing was bad. The whole team stopped, and the stopwatch kept ticking. The drill failed by a few seconds. Before anyone could even breathe, Sergeant Davis exploded in anger. "What did I tell you?" he yelled, pointing at her in front of the whole squad. "One small mistake. One. And the entire mission is destroyed." Aisha tried to pick up the bag quickly, but he kicked it away. "You are the reason this team will never succeed. You are the reason people will die in real missions. You don't belong here." His words cut through the air like a knife. The squad stood still, silent, no one daring to speak. A few looked away, uncomfortable. A few looked at Aisha with pity. But most just stared, waiting to see what she would do. Aisha stood there, frozen. She wanted to explain, to say it was just an accident, to say she was trying. But Davis didn't want explanations. "You're dead weight," he shouted again. "And I don't carry dead weight on my team. Get out. Right now. You're done here." She looked at him with wide eyes, her throat tight. She wanted to speak, but her voice refused to come out. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from holding back everything she felt. She slowly nodded. Not because he was right, but because she knew no words would change his mind. She walked away from the field, her boots heavy in the dirt, and the whole squad watched her go. No one stopped her. No one called her back. Not even Ryan, who once spoke kindly to her. He stayed silent, maybe scared to go against the sergeant. Aisha walked to her room and closed the door behind her. That was the moment she finally let her tears fall. She cried not because she was weak, but because she had given everything she had, and still it wasn't enough. She thought of all the days she trained harder than everyone. All the nights she stayed awake practicing. All the times she ignored insults and pushed through pain. And yet, with one mistake, she was thrown out like trash. Her chest hurt, but slowly, through the tears, a calm voice inside her said, "You didn't fail. They just didn't see your strength yet." She wiped her face, stood in front of the mirror, and stared at herself. Her eyes were red, but there was fire in them. She said softly, "I'm not done. Not like this." She packed her things, but not in defeat. She packed like someone who still had a mission inside her heart. She didn't know how, but she knew this was not the end of her story, because the world had a strange way of turning tables. One day, the same man who threw her out would regret it. One day, he would need the person he called dead weight. And when that day came, Aisha would not need to shout. Her actions would speak louder than every insult he ever threw at her. That day was coming, and fate was already preparing it. She just didn't know how close it was. The days after Aisha was removed from the team felt slow and empty. She was no longer part of the squad. No more early morning roll calls. No more endless drills. No more harsh commands from Sergeant Davis. She was gone from the training camp, but the fire inside her did not go out. She didn't go back home. Instead, she joined a volunteer rescue group in the same city. She told herself, even if they don't want me, someone out there will need me. She trained on her own. She took small rescue missions, flood help, first aid assistance, missing kid searches. She was learning, growing, and preparing herself silently. She didn't have a uniform anymore, but she still had purpose. Then one morning, everything changed. Not just for her, but for the world around her. A massive earthquake struck the city. Buildings collapsed, streets cracked open, people screamed, Alarms rang everywhere. Dust filled the air, sirens echoed, and panic spread like fire. It was chaos, a disaster bigger than anything the rescue forces had faced before. The same military squad Aisha once trained with was immediately called into action. They were ordered to reach a collapsed office building where dozens of people were trapped under concrete and steel. Sergeant Davis led the team, confident as always, giving quick orders, moving fast. But no one expected what would happen next. As they entered the broken structure, aftershocks began. The ground shook again, and before they could react, another part of the building crashed down on them. Within seconds, the exit was blocked. Heavy slabs of concrete fell, and the team was trapped inside. 3 soldiers were badly injured. Davis himself got stuck under a huge concrete beam, unable to move. His leg was pinned, and blood was spreading fast. The air was filled with dust, the cracks were tightening, and the temperature was dropping. They tried to call for help, but the radios were damaged. Outside, other rescue workers gathered, but the entry was too narrow. Whoever went inside had to crawl through a space barely wide enough for one person. And they had to be skilled, very skilled. One wrong move could bring down the rest of the structure. The trained soldiers outside tried, but none of them could fit through. Time was running out. The trapped men were breathing in dust. If they weren't rescued soon, they would suffocate or bleed out. Then someone shouted, "We need someone small, someone trained. We can't reach them like this." That was the moment fate finally made its move. A volunteer rescue truck stopped near the building. Aisha was inside it. She jumped out as soon as she heard the situation. She saw the chaos, the panic, the debris, and then she saw something that froze her heart. The squad trapped inside was her old squad, and the one calling for help through a broken radio was Sergeant Davis. For a few seconds, everything around her went silent in her mind. She remembered the insults, the shouting, the humiliation, the way he kicked her out like she was nothing. She remembered every word. "You're dead weight. You don't belong here. You will only drag us down." But then her heart spoke louder. Someone is dying. This is not about revenge. This is about who you are. She rushed toward the rescue leader and said, "I can go in. I'm trained for this." The man looked at her, surprised. "You? Are you sure? It's dangerous. The space is too tight. One wrong move and the whole thing could fall." Aisha nodded. "That's why you need someone small, someone calm, someone who won't panic. Let me go." They hesitated only a moment, then agreed. The situation was desperate. They didn't have time to doubt her. She tied a rope around her waist, secured her gloves, and put on a helmet. The rescuers cleared the entrance as much as they could. Aisha took a deep breath and crawled into the darkness. The inside was worse than she expected. The air was dusty, the ground sharp, the ceiling unstable. She could hear faint voices, groans, metal creaking. She moved slowly, remembering everything she trained for. Steady breathing, low movement, controlled pressure, zero panic. After several tense minutes, she finally reached them. There they were, injured soldiers, bleeding, coughing, weak, and in the middle of them, trapped under concrete, was Sergeant Davis. When he opened his eyes and saw who had come, it didn't feel real. His eyes widened. His lips trembled. The same woman he once threw away was now the only person who could save him. And at that moment, the strong, angry sergeant who once shouted at her was just a man scared of dying. He didn't shout now. He didn't insult her now. He just whispered, with pain in his voice, "Aisha, please, don't leave me." And in that moment, the world had changed. The one he called dead weight was now his only lifeline. And Aisha? She didn't smile in victory. She didn't say, "I told you so." She simply said, with calm strength, "I'm not leaving," because real strength is not in muscles. It is in character. And she had more of it than he ever did. Part 5 will continue from here, where she begins the rescue, and Davis faces the weight of his own words. Shall I continue? Aisha slowly crawled closer to the trapped men, her heart beating fast but her mind completely focused. The air inside the broken building was heavy, filled with dust and the smell of blood and concrete. Every sound echoed, the dripping water, the quiet groans of pain, the slow cracking of weakened walls. One wrong move and the entire place could collapse again. She reached the injured soldiers first. One had a deep cut on his head, another had a broken arm, and the third could barely speak. But none of them were as badly trapped as Sergeant Davis. His lower body was pinned under a massive concrete block, the weight slowly crushing his leg. His face was pale, sweat running down his forehead, and his hands were shaking. He wasn't shouting orders now. He wasn't strong or confident. He was scared, really scared. When their eyes met, everything was silent for a moment. The man who once called her weak was now looking at her with the eyes of someone who had lost all control. "Aisha," he whispered, almost in disbelief. You came." She didn't answer that. She didn't need to. Her actions were louder than words. She took a quick look around, calculating the situation like a real professional. The space was tiny, no tools could fit, and she had only her rope, her hands, and her training. "You're bleeding a lot," she said softly, checking his leg. "You won't last long if we wait for machines. I have to make space and pull you out manually." Davis swallowed hard. Can you do it?" Aisha didn't hesitate. "Yes, I will." His eyes filled, not with anger, not with pride, but with regret. She turned to the other injured soldiers and said, "Stay still. I'll come back for you after I free him." Then she began the rescue. Every move she made was slow, controlled, and smart. She shifted small pieces of concrete first, making sure nothing else collapsed. Her hands trembled from the force she had to use, but she didn't stop. Sweat ran down her neck, dust stuck to her skin, but her focus never broke. Davis watched her quietly. He remembered how he once laughed at her strength, how he called her dead weight, how he told her she didn't belong. Now, the same person he tried to remove was saving his life with more strength and courage than any of the men he believed were better. Minutes felt like hours. Aisha tied a rope around the top of the concrete piece, securing it to a metal bar, creating a lever. She used her body weight, her training, her endurance, everything she had learned, just to move the slab enough to free him. Her arms burned, her back hurt, and dust scraped her throat, but she kept pushing. Finally, the concrete shifted. Davis gasped in pain as his leg came free, but he could breathe again. He looked at her, stunned. You did it," he said, voice shaking. Aisha didn't celebrate. She simply said, "We're not done yet. I have to get you out." She wrapped an arm under his shoulders and started dragging him carefully toward the exit route she had crawled in from. It was a tight space. She moved slowly, guiding him, making sure his injured leg didn't get caught. During the crawl, Davis spoke again. But this time, his voice was not the voice of a sergeant. "I was wrong about you," he said quietly. "I should have seen your strength. I treated you like nothing, and you still came back." Aisha didn't reply immediately. She just kept moving him forward. Then finally she spoke. "You didn't see me, but I always saw the mission. That's why I'm here." Those words hit him harder than the concrete ever could. By the time they reached the opening, the rescuers outside saw movement and rushed in. They pulled Davis out, shocked to see who had brought him back alive. Some of the soldiers outside whispered in disbelief. "Aisha? She saved him? After everything he did to her? Unbelievable." But Aisha didn't stop. She went back inside again to save the other trapped men. Because saving one person wasn't enough. Because her courage wasn't for praise. It was who she was. By the time all of them were rescued, she was exhausted, covered in dust, her hands bleeding, but alive. And more importantly, she proved something no one could deny anymore. She was not dead weight. She was the backbone of survival. Meanwhile, Davis was taken into an ambulance. Before the doors closed, he looked at her one last time. And this time, he didn't speak like a leader. He spoke like a man who finally understood reality. "Thank you. I owe you my life." Aisha nodded. But deep inside, she knew something. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about proving herself right. The world may push you aside. People may judge you. But when life tests you, your true strength speaks louder than any insult ever spoken. Part 6 will show what happens after the rescue, how the world reacts, how Davis deals with his guilt, and how Aisha finally earns the respect she always deserved. When the last injured soldier was pulled out of the debris, the rescue team finally breathed with relief. People outside clapped, shouted, and thanked God. Reporters arrived, cameras flashed, and medical teams rushed the injured to ambulances. But in the middle of all this noise, Aisha stood quietly, covered in dust, her clothes torn, her hands shaking from exhaustion. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't celebrating. She had done what she came for, and that was enough. As the ambulance door closed, Sergeant Davis kept staring at her through the small window. His face was pale, not just from pain, but from guilt. The same woman he insulted had saved his life with her own hands. The same dead weight had carried him out of death. He wanted to speak to her again, but the door shut before he could. The ambulance drove away, leaving him with his thoughts and his regret. On the ground, officers from other rescue teams approached Aisha. "You went in there alone? You moved that concrete by yourself? You saved the sergeant with no equipment?" They couldn't believe it. Some of these men were trained for years, yet they stood outside helpless, and the person who did the impossible was the one they had all doubted. One officer said, "You should have been part of the main rescue force. You were more ready than half of them." Aisha didn't respond with pride. She simply said, "I didn't save a sergeant. I saved a human being. That's the job." But not everyone stayed silent anymore. Ryan, the trainee who once spoke kindly to her, walked up to her looking embarrassed. I should have defended you," he said softly. "I knew you were strong. I just didn't want to go against Davis." Aisha looked at him and gave a tired smile. "You don't have to explain. Fear is louder than truth sometimes." Ryan lowered his head. "Not anymore. I'll tell everyone what you did. The world needs to know." And the world did find out. Within hours, news channels ran the headline, "Woman rescuer saves sergeant who once threw her off his team." Videos spread. People commented online. Some were angry at Davis. Some admired Aisha. Some were shocked that the person he once insulted had more courage than the entire squad. Many people said, "She wasn't weak. She was just underestimated. She didn't need revenge. She proved herself through action." The strongest person in that building wasn't the sergeant. It was her. While the world talked, Aisha stayed silent. She didn't give interviews. She didn't talk about what happened. She just sat alone under a tree near the rescue camp, her eyes tired but peaceful. That evening, a car arrived near the field hospital where Davis was being treated. He had insisted on being discharged early. He wanted to see only one person. He walked slowly on crutches, his injured leg wrapped, his pride completely gone. When he found Aisha, she was sitting quietly, drinking water from a bottle, still in the same dusty clothes. He stood in front of her, and for the first time ever, the sergeant saluted her. A full, respectful salute. Aisha looked up, confused. She never expected that from him. He spoke, voice low and honest. "I trained men for years. I thought strength was about muscles, speed, and power. But you showed me something I never understood." He paused, eyes heavy with regret. "You were never dead weight. I was, because I carried the weight of my own ego." Aisha didn't speak. She let him continue. "I was wrong about you. I judged you without seeing your heart. And that almost cost me my life." He took a deep breath. "Thank you. Not just for saving me, but for proving what real strength looks like." Aisha finally spoke, calm and steady. "You didn't have to believe in me. I believed in myself. That was enough." Those words hit him harder than any insult ever could. He nodded slowly, accepting the truth, and said, "If the team ever has a leader stronger than me, it should be you." Aisha didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't take revenge. She simply said, Respect is earned. Not given. Not forced. Earned. And at that moment, even the man who once shouted, "Get out!" now understood how wrong he had been. She didn't need a uniform to prove her worth. She didn't need his approval to be strong. Because real power is not in being accepted. It's in staying true to yourself even when the world rejects you. Part 7 will show how life changes after this. How the squad reacts, how the media responds, and how Aisha's quiet strength begins inspiring others. The moment Emma heard the sergeant's weak voice calling her name, everything inside her froze. For a second, she stood there in shock, unable to believe what was happening. The man who once shouted at her, insulted her, and threw her out of the team, was now buried under heavy concrete and begging for her help. Her mind flashed back to the day he yelled, "Get out! You're dead weight." Those words used to hurt her like a wound. But now, the same voice was full of fear, pain, and desperation. Emma didn't waste time. Her heart was beating fast, but her steps were steady. She rushed toward the broken building, ignoring the dust, the falling stones, and the people shouting warnings. She didn't care about danger. All she knew was that someone was alive under the debris, and that someone needed her. When she reached the collapsed area, she could hear him clearly. "Emma, help me, please." His voice was weak, almost fading. She dropped to her knees and started removing smaller pieces of broken concrete with her bare hands. Her fingers started to bleed, but she didn't stop. She tried to stay calm, speaking loudly so he knew he wasn't alone. "Hold on, I'm here. Don't panic. I'll get you out." There was silence for a moment, then a painful reply. I shouldn't have said those things to you." Emma paused. She didn't expect that. The sergeant was apologizing. Not because someone told him to, not because it was a rule, but because he was scared, helpless, and finally realized her worth. But she didn't answer back. She didn't want to argue or say, "I told you so." She was here to save a life, not to make someone feel guilty. That was the difference between them. He judged her. She helped him. She found a metal rod and tried to move a bigger piece of stone. It was heavy, but she kept trying. Every second, she was thinking, "He may not have respected me, but I respect life, and saving him is my duty." Suddenly, another soldier rushed to her and said, "Emma, it's dangerous. The whole thing could collapse again." She looked at him with strong eyes and replied, "If he's still alive, then I'm not leaving." Her voice had no fear. It had strength. It had something the sergeant never saw in her before: leadership. More people joined, and together they made space to reach the trapped sergeant. Emma crawled inside first. The air was dusty, and there was barely any room to move. She saw him, covered in dust, bruised, and one leg stuck under a concrete slab. His eyes were full of pain and regret. He looked at her like she was his only hope. The moment their eyes met, he whispered, "You came. You really came." Emma nodded and said softly, "I don't leave people behind." Those words hit him harder than the concrete. Because that was exactly what he did to her. He left her behind without a second thought. She checked his pulse, looked at his injury and said, "Your leg is stuck. We'll have to lift this together. You're hurt, but I need you to stay awake. Focus on my voice." He nodded slowly, tears mixing with the dust on his face. The strong sergeant, the one who always walked like nothing could defeat him, was now broken, not just physically but inside too. With the help of others outside, they used rope and tools to slowly lift the slab. Emma used all her strength, pulling, pushing, lifting. Her arms were shaking, sweat falling, but she didn't stop. She kept saying, "Just a little more. Don't give up. You're almost free." Finally, the concrete moved enough for her to drag him out. The moment his leg was free, he cried in pain, but she held him and said, "You're safe. I've got you." As they carried him out, people watched in silence. Everyone saw the same powerful image. The woman he once called dead weight was now the one carrying his life in her hands. When they placed him on the stretcher, he held her wrist weakly and said, voice shaking, "I was wrong. You're stronger than all of us. Emma just gave a small smile, not filled with pride, not filled with revenge, but with peace. She didn't need his approval anymore. She already proved who she was through her actions. That day, the sergeant didn't just get rescued from concrete. He was rescued from his own ego. And Emma? She finally understood something important. People may judge you, insult you, or try to break you, but your value doesn't depend on them. It depends on what you choose to do. She chose courage. She chose kindness. She chose humanity. And that made her stronger than any rank, any medal, or any loud voice. The ambulance took the sergeant away, and the crowd slowly disappeared, but Emma stayed there for a moment, looking at the broken building. Her hands were dirty, her clothes were torn, and her body was tired, but her heart felt calm. She did something she wasn't expected to do, something even the strongest soldiers couldn't do at that moment. She saved a man who once treated her like she was nothing, a man who believed she was weak, useless, and unfit to stand beside real soldiers. But now the truth was clear. She was the one who stood when others fell. She was the one who didn't run away. She was the one who proved that strength is not always about muscles or a loud voice. Sometimes, it's about courage, kindness, and the power to act when no one else will. Later that day, Emma was called to the military hospital. She didn't know what to expect. Maybe a report. Maybe a formality. Maybe nothing special. But when she entered the room, she saw something she never imagined. The sergeant sitting in his hospital bed, waiting for her. His leg was covered in bandages, and he looked tired, but his eyes were soft. Not angry, not proud, just honest. As soon as she walked in, he tried to sit up straight. He said her name slowly, almost like it was the first time he was saying it with respect. Emma. She didn't reply immediately. She just stood there, silent, letting him speak. He took a deep breath and said, "I owe you my life." Those words were not just an apology. They were an admission, a confession, a surrender of his ego. For the first time, he wasn't talking as a sergeant, not as a man trying to show power, but as a human being who understood what it feels like to be helpless. He continued, voice shaking a little, "I was wrong about you. I judged you without giving you a chance. I disrespected you. I humiliated you in front of others. And still, you came back for me." Emma finally spoke, but her voice was calm, not emotional. "I didn't save you because of what you said before. I saved you because you were in danger. And because that's what a real soldier does." He looked down, ashamed, but also grateful. Her words were not angry. They were true. And sometimes, the truth hurts more than any insult. He whispered, "I don't deserve your kindness." Emma looked at him and said something he never expected. "It's not about what you deserve. It's about who I choose to be." That line hit him harder than any punishment could. Because that was the difference between them. He used rank. She used humanity. He used authority. She used heart. A few days later, something surprising happened on the base. A meeting was held. All soldiers were gathered. Emma stood in the back, not expecting anything. She was not the type who tried to be in the spotlight. She just wanted to do her duty and live with dignity. But suddenly, her name was called. Private Emma Carter stepped forward. She walked slowly to the front. Her heart was beating fast. Everybody's eyes were on her. And then she saw him, the sergeant, standing with crutches, even though he was still recovering. The commander handed him something, a medal. And then, in front of everyone, the sergeant said, "This soldier saved my life. She showed bravery, strength, and loyalty, even when I failed to show her respect. She is not dead weight. She is the reason I am alive today." He pinned the medal on her uniform, but what mattered more than the medal were his next words. "From this day forward, she is not just part of this team. She is an example of what a true soldier should be." The whole base clapped. Some even stood up. The same people who once watched her get thrown out were now clapping for her. Emma didn't cry. She didn't smile too much. She just stood there with quiet pride. Because she didn't fight for a medal. She didn't save him for praise. She did what was right, and that was enough. Later that evening, one of the young soldiers came to her and said, "I used to think I had to be loud or aggressive to be strong. But you proved something different." Emma looked at him and replied with a soft smile, "Real strength doesn't need to shout." That night, she sat outside looking at the stars. The world didn't suddenly become perfect. People would still judge. Some would still underestimate her. But she no longer needed their approval. She knew her worth, and now so did everyone else. And the sergeant? He learned the biggest lesson of his life. The people you call weak today might be the only ones strong enough to save you tomorrow. The story didn't end with revenge. It ended with respect. Not forced respect. Earned respect. The kind that cannot be taken back. Because it was built on truth. And from that day on, no one ever dared call her dead weight again.